pas prendre trop de retard. Déjà, bonjour, bonsoir à tous et toutes. Pour ceux qui ne me connaissent pas encore, je suis la directrice de l'Institut Français, Laurence Païs, et accessoirement consul général en même temps. Ravie de vous accueillir pour cette belle soirée. Oh, vous m'entendez? Voilà. De la nuit des idées. Tout le monde comprend? Okay, don't worry, I'll switch to English. It's just an introduction, so nothing really very important to understand. Just to remind you that the Night of Ideas has been created in 2016, so we're having the 8th edition this year. It was created in Paris, and the idea was to bring together French and international thinkers, artists, to debate, discuss, just for, I should say, the sake of discussing, exchanging ideas, and it was a great success. So it has been extended to our network in the world, embassies, French institutes. Every year we gather. It used to be a set date at the end of January. This year it's between end of January and mid-February, so in the UK it will be today, in London it will be tomorrow, I think, and in Oxford the day after, anyway, around the 8th of February, and with a common theme for everyone. This year, last year it was together. This year the theme is more. As you can imagine, this is wide enough for everyone to adapt or to choose a topic under that common theme. So why more? I think the idea came from the comment on dit la devise of the Olympics game. They will be in France next year, and so it's higher and more and more. But of course, we're not going to speak about the Olympics or about sports. But we thought it would be interesting to reflect on the culture today that we have of always asking more and wanting more, whether in education, in sport, in the professional life, and to do that, we had the opportunity to have a screening of the film that you will see and that Johan will present, in order to introduce an exchange, a dialogue. The idea is that there will be no report. It will just be a flow of ideas, exchanges, debate on this challenge, or this common challenge that we have nowadays. And so I think I'm speaking too much again, and I will let Johan introduce the theme and the panel, and I wish you all a very nice evening, and after the debate we'll invite you to a glass of wine if you wish. So merci beaucoup et à tout à l'heure.
Bonsoir à tous. Hi everyone, my name is Johan Magdanikis. I'm in charge of the cooperation, the cultural cooperation between France and Scotland, and it's a real pleasure to have you here tonight, and I particularly thank our panelists here that I'm going to present to you. So, Deborah Kayembe. Deborah, you are the current rector of the University of Edinburgh. Some of your roles are to preside at the University Court and to chair meetings of the General Council in absence of the Chancellor. You work very closely with the students and the Edinburgh University Students Association. You were called to the Congolese Bar Association in 2000. I've been a member of the Institute of Translation and Interpreting from 2010 to 2020. In 2016, you joined the language services of the Office of the Prosecutor at the International Criminal Court and the International Criminal Court Bar Association. You served as a Scottish Refugee Council Board member from 2013 to 2016, joined the Royal Society of Edinburgh, making you the first African to have a portrait erected at their wall since 2019, in tribute to your achievements and contributions to the Scottish Society. You joined the Young Academy of Scotland representing refugee minorities, and you also sit as an expert lawyer to the RSE working group for Africa. Deborah, you're constantly petitioning to the Scottish Parliament in favour of anti-racist education in Scotland. I would precisely, in 2017, you founded the charity Full Option. In July 2020, you launched the Freedom Walk campaign, civil rights movement, which aims to lobby and campaign on behalf of citizens by promoting social reforms, racial justice, and community harmony. We are really grateful and honored to have you with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for
Let me introduce you to our second panelist, Dr. Ian Cochran. You are the Program Director of the MSc Climate Change, Finance and Investment, and you are part of the Accounting and Finance Group in the University of Edinburgh Business School. You also are a member of the Centre for Business, Climate Change and Sustainability. As a lecturer, you are organizing three of these following courses: Climate Policy and Investment, International Climate Finance and Climate Risk, and Investment Alignment. You hold a PhD in Economics from Université Paris-Dauphine in France, a Master of Public Affairs from Sciences Po, still in France in Paris, schools you later lectured at in master's level programs. You also hold a BA in Policy Studies from the Syracuse University Maxwell School of Public Affairs in the USA, and finally you are involved in the Institute for Climate Economics as well as in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And again, really we're grateful for you to be here tonight and participate to these debates and talks. Thank you very much. Our last guest, Gabriel Bonamy, is on his way. His bus has been delayed, coming from Aberdeen, so we are from St Andrews. So really grateful he's making it tonight. Gabriel is the translator of the film to English subtitles. He's currently studying for a Master's of Arts in Economics and Geography at the University of St Andrews, and he sits as a student representative at the Environmental Sustainability Board. He's really passionate about energy and climate issues and especially willing to improve the accessibility of scientific knowledge towards elected officials as a means to better inform public policy. So it's not really a surprise to know that Gabriel was involved in this production, and we're glad to have him in the panel also to ask questions and to answer your questions, obviously. He will join us a bit later. That's it for me. I think we're going to just enjoy the film. Thank you again for being here tonight.
Non, parce que toi, tu as une pensée, vous avez un courant de pensée, encore une fois, je le dis avec respect, hein, on appelle ça des catastrophistes.
Non, c'est pas catastrophique, c'est réaliste.
Non, mais...
J'ai eu ces discussions interminables avec mes parents des dizaines de fois. En fait, ils ne comprennent pas pourquoi leur fils, bientôt ingénieur, refuse le job de rêve, la voiture de fonction et le gros salaire par conviction écologique et sociale. Et pourtant, je ne suis pas le seul.
Des étudiants de grandes écoles qui refusent de travailler pour les entreprises qui polluent.
L'élite quand même qui se pose des questions sur le modèle économique, capitaliste, etc.
Des étudiants de grandes écoles se mobilisent.
C'est pas du tout anodin, c'est un franchissement de cap dans l'enseignement supérieur.
Eux aussi avaient un destin bien tracé. Ces 6 jeunes sont de Polytechnique, de Sciences Po, de Centrale. Tous ont fait un choix radical. Renoncer à l'avenir qu'on leur promettait pour une vie qu'ils jugent plus compatible avec les enjeux environnementaux et sociétaux. Ce film les suit dans leur rupture avec la voie classique proposée par les grandes écoles et dans l'écriture de leur propre histoire.
Bonjour madame, vous êtes de Saint-Brieuc ?
Non. Je tire dessus, voilà. C'est pas comme la blette.
Voilà.
Ah ouais.
Vous avez 2 minutes pour répondre à des questions ?
Oui.
Bon bah super.
Il n'y a pas l'eau chaude partout, il y a l'eau chaude que dans ces 2 douches-là et il n'y a pas beaucoup d'eau chaude.
Ils incarnent selon moi ce phénomène sociétal et j'ai pu les suivre dans leur intimité.
Je pense pas re-rentrer dans le système un jour quoi.
Ils sont censés s'organiser ensemble, voir ce qu'ils font, sauf qu'ils sont pas capables de le faire donc...
Je suis en train de me rendre compte qu'il y a plein de choses que j'ai pas pris en compte et que genre ce projet c'est trop difficile, tu vois.
Vous verrez, c'est un film qui sort des codes. Je l'ai fait avec mon cœur et j'espère qu'il vous permettra de comprendre ce qu'il se passe dans la tête de notre génération lorsque nous tournons le dos aux banques et aux grandes industries.
Bonsoir à tous, à toutes. Je suis Philippe Nioux, attaché de coopération pour le français ici. Et je suis vraiment très très heureux de voir une salle pleine pour notre débat pour la nuit des idées 2023. Je vous dis quelques mots dans ma langue maternelle, c'est la règle, mais vous verrez, je vais passer dans quelques moments en anglais, vous aurez la drôle d'impression que je continue de parler la langue de Molière. Et je l'assume avec beaucoup d'humilité. Gabriel nous a rejoints et on est très heureux de voir que les transports ont fonctionné. Donc, très grand merci pour Madame la Directrice, chère Déborah, Dr Cochrane. So it's my very humble duty to try to moderate the talk tonight. Of course, you will have questions. We just finished the movie, the documentary film, which is very well built. It's about 35 minutes of them, saying what they see, and then the second part is about, what they plan to do. So why is that those guys, those young students who are brilliant, they succeeded, they had everything, and all of a sudden they decide to change the scenario and say something which is like enough. Due to the climate change and what we are living, what the poor planet is living, they say no, we don't want to have this path, beautiful salaries, cars, and so on, and they decide to take a different path. So the question tonight is more or less, or I use my friend Johan, more of less. Merci Johan pour ça, more of less. So that's what it's all about tonight. So the first person I turn to is you, Gabrielle. So you have been an ardent, very strong supporter of Arthur Gossev's project from the beginning, and you took great care of the translation. Thank you very much for that. Could you tell us how, and why you get involved in this journey, and why really these guys want, and I quote them, invent their own life and change the world?
Of course. Thank you for having me. Just to bounce back on what you said, I think what you're looking for is less is more. So I discovered Ruptures in 2021, starting my second year of university up in St. Andrews. My brother sent me a text saying, look at what this guy is doing, he could interest you. And so I found a way to contact Arthur. I don't remember how, but I got his email address somehow. I texted him and said if he was willing to let me translate the movie, which he did miraculously. And so I translated it alongside my studies for a few months, and then took it upon myself to want to distribute it across the UK, because that was only logical. And I didn't really know where to start. I have no experience in this. So I started by sending emails to tons of universities, trying to get someone to listen to me, to just welcome us. And I was really lucky back in October to find a professor here in the University of Edinburgh who was willing to welcome the project. And so we had a screening here, and since then we've gotten, I'm feeling more interest towards the movie because we've built a small reputation. So we did the University of Edinburgh in October, St. Andrews of course, I organised a small screening there, but not many people attended, it was mostly my friends. In an empty tutorial room. Yesterday night we had a screening at the University of Oxford. Today we're here, and in March we're going to the University of Glasgow. So we're building up this project and hoping to try and assess how prevalent this movement is in the UK, because we've got no indication of how strong UK students are in terms of these life questions that French students seem to have very, strong opinions on. So that's a bit of a summary of how I got involved with all of this.
I have a question for that later. Is it really just a French, situation or not? Something maybe more personal now, Gabriel, if you don't mind. Those young students are, as I said earlier, brilliant. We could imagine them easily as young pupils at school, and maybe it was your case, from primary, secondary schools, like being the best in the class, being you know, always the best marks, and they had loving families, and that's very touching in a movie. So the whole, you know, system around them was helping and very, you know, let's say, supportive of them. Do you think that, you know, for those who come from a different background, for the most fragile ones, you know, who don't have families, who know what is education about, do you think that those, you know, who are dreaming of this, you know, aim would be that, you know, renouncing and in let's say a session as you know, coming from where you come from?
I think everyone's response to the message that Rupture brings is very individual, and the movie's message is not at all to generalize and you know, force everyone to change the path that they've set out for themselves. We get the same question often when it comes to privilege and unprivilege. Do we expect everyone to change their life to the same degree as people who have the means, who have the support from their family or from finances in general? And the clear answer is that no, we don't expect everyone to pitch in the same amount. It's clear that environmental decisions and environmental concerns are intimately tied with social justice, which is why you know, when we're talking about subjects like sustainable development, or when these topics are taught at school and university, there's always that social justice aspect and a very intense discussion of inequalities that are in the backdrop of ecological questions. So I'm well aware that many students don't even begin to start thinking about the issues that Rupture presents, because in some countries, unlike France, you have to put in huge amounts of money just to receive an undergraduate education. And I think that's one of the main differences that we see between student movements in France and abroad, is that, you know, your priority when you come out of university in the UK or in the US on a larger scale is that you want to repay your loan and you want to finally get some sense of financial stability. And it's clear that the students that we see in the movie are all privileged, and they don't, you know, avoid that at all, that aspect that characterizes them.
Thank you very much for that, Gabriel. Dr. Copeland, thank you so much for being with us now. Very frank questions, you know, so that we go straight to the point. Do you recognize yourself in these radical changes? I'm saying this because, you know, you were part of this. You know, you went to uni in France. You had a brilliant, you know, you did, you know, Sciences Po and Paris Dauphine. So you were a few years ago part of this. So would you, you know, like if I take you in a time machine back to time, would you go, knowing what you know about climate change, take the same path now?
That's a good question, just to see how far to hold this away. I mean, I'm about 15 years older than I think the director of the film. So not that much, but still enough, I think, where things were maybe a little bit different, where the discussion on climate change and all of the sustainability issues maybe wasn't as developed within university, so in general there was less awareness. I mean, when I was at Sciences Po, I did a master's program where there was an environmental specialization, and I ended up then, from someone from the OECD, presenting their work on climate change, working on climate change at the OECD. So actually very quickly, I almost found a way to work on these issues that I was very much interested in, but from within the system, if we want to be very simplistic in how we look at it. Because I mean, the OECD, in terms of a market-based economy, capitalist system, has been a powerhouse of pushing that agenda for quite some time. So when I'm watching, I think, you know, the individuals in the film that we've just seen, it reminds me more of actually the people I've worked with over the last maybe decade, both in terms of my students, a number of which are in the room, and it'd be great to hear from them later if possible. But also, when I was at a think tank based in Paris, financed by the Caisse de dépôt and the Agence Française de Développement, so, two government institutions with mandated financial concerns, one of which was climate change and continues to be, but working with actually a lot of folks coming directly out of university who were experimenting, while working in a think tank on climate change, so engaged very much, let's say, in a more systems approach to thinking about these issues. Also, experimenting with collective living arrangements and a lot of the different, moyens de vie or ways of living that we saw in the film. So I see myself in some of it, but I think also this is representative of maybe a different generation, even if it's only 15 years, and perhaps that's coming from a point of frustration, and that's...
Yeah, well, my second question is more or less in the same, is that, is it really just the impact of the climate change which is behind the move, or do you think there's something more deeper than that? Like they say, it's reinvent the world, it's to invent a new world, it's like the system that we built, I'm talking about my generation, we failed, we've built something based on, success, and eventually those young people, they don't want part of it. So this is climate change. Maybe the first leverage, and maybe it's something much deeper than that. What do you think?
I think, and kind of building on what you said, Gabriel, there is this also issue in France where folks who went to the schools that they went to, there is an expectation of success and an expectation that you will both succeed at school and work very, very hard to get in and pass the concours and pass all the exams. And once you're in there, then life, there's a promised life for you. And I think it was interesting to hear how some of the graduates in the film mentioned, the life that was promised to them. Because that actually I feel is a very grande école French way of looking at university as well. I mean, there is a system that if you pay the dues, you get through it, then you get your life. And I think that is different from a lot of other places, and coming as an American into the French education system, it was interesting to see, a very different way of seeing it, and that also creates a certain rigidity, where taking a side deviation is seen as something negative historically in France, whereas in the US, I have to say I confused folks in my first internship interview in France because they looked at my background and they said, okay, you started in architecture, then you kind of looked at cultural resource management around archaeology, and then you did public affairs, and now you're doing economics related to climate change, and they didn't know what to do with me. So I think there's a little bit of an issue in France where structurally that rigidity might make people feel that they have to step completely outside the system because there's no space within the system to move in. And I think for me that's the takeaway from this film is, how do you actually make change? Can you make change within the system? And that's hopefully what we're kind of doing with our MSc. And again, I want to hear my students' thoughts on that later. Or do you, is the problem so big or the system so rigid that you have to step out completely? And then how do you actually do that? Because as we saw, even with a very privileged group, in terms of access finance, it was very hard. So to ask others to step outside of the system who don't have that same access, is even more challenging, I think.
Did you watch the film before? Or?
No. This is all new to me this evening. Okay. Yeah.
So what did you think of all together? It's the first time. This is, I told Gabriel when we prepared, the talk. It's for a first movie. It's pretty impressive. It's well filmed. He has a message to give. But first, what's your first impression of that?
I mean, usually I'm not asked about my artistic critique when I'm on a panel. It's usually about economics and financial instruments. So I don't know if I'm a good judge of that, but I have to say, it kept me engaged. It kept me interested. The characters were dynamic in the sense they weren't just one note. You saw, their strengths and weaknesses of character and thinking, and, that whole arc was there, which was great. But I think that really also did help you. I'm glad we got to the challenges, because for a moment I was like, are we just going to talk about trying to create something, but not talking about how hard it is, even when you have, the access and the privilege that all of those folks did.
It's courageous, they say, it's painful. Merci beaucoup, docteur. Madame la rectrice chère Déborah. Thank you so much. We're delighted.
Je suis bilingue. Hein?
Je sais. We do code switching anytime.
Ok.
Vous répondez dans la langue que vous voulez.
Merci beaucoup.
Dans la langue du cœur, alors.
Oui, en français.
Alors, en français. Merci beaucoup, Deborah. So let's go back to you. You know, where at the position you had. Mm-hmm. Have you seen a trend like this one here in the past years? And I mean, as a rector, if this is the case here in the most successful, you know, university at a global scale, would you be afraid of that? You know, are you concerned that if this keep on going, there will be no elite, there will be no one, you know, at the top looking at whatever system is?
I definitely want this to keep on going. I need more of this. Why? Because the society where we live in right now is crumbling. And we have tried to keep the status quo, and it's not working. And if we are not careful in the way of our living, we might lose it altogether. So this young man here, this group of youngsters here, I want to see them in my university of Edinburgh and speaking in the campus, you know, with the other students and spreading the intelligence, because they are intelligent, they are inspired, and they are human. You see them dancing, you see them crying, while they come up from the space where they are very comfortable, everything is being given to them, and they say, no, we are crashing. We're not going there, we're changing this. So I'm the marraine, they're gonna find me, that's for sure.
But so, if I understood well, this movement at the moment is not seen here in your university.
Well, the first thing I have to say, I'm very impressed that it's made in French, because I have never, I mean, for a long time, I was looking to see the brain of the French-speaking people, and last year when I watched the movie, I was, wow, this is happening. I think there's few people within the University of Edinburgh share this idea, but again, the establishment made you. The establishment gave you the money. You need to work on continuing the establishment. Don't break it, you know. And I get to the university called. And bonsoir tout le monde, comment allez-vous? You can speak like that here. You see, this is the change that we need, the change of tolerance, the change of justice, where people need to be capable of expressing themselves in a comfortable way they think. And we have translator for that. So if it's spoken in French, there's a translator in English to understand the context. So the diversity, the parity in our way of living in a society. So I hope, you know, there are students here from Edinburgh, they have the courage to follow this young man, this youngest here, because they're showing us the light that we now need in order to come out from this chaos that is coming fast.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Rectrice. Another question, which is just for you, is this another typical French attitude? You know, we French, we love revolutions.
Oh yeah.
So of course, you know, it happens because it's France.
Yeah.
So, but is that true, or is just, you know, as Dr. Cochrane said?
Even the English, even those who speak English, when they come to the table to discuss, they want to refer about revolution. They go to the French. You know, when you discuss about something in the end, they say, ask the French. They know better about this than anyone else. So I think it's a French thing, but we haven't had a chance to watch many kind of documentaries made in French by French people. I want to see them more, you know, translated in English, of course, because we need to send the message throughout the society. But I'm really glad I watched this tonight. Thank you for that.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Rectrice. That was the promise we made, you know, is to give as much possible, you know, thought and talk, you know, puisque c'est la nuit des idées, to the floor. So, as I said earlier, any question to any of our, you know, distinguished panel, just raise your hand, and we don't have any microphone, just speak up. The sound here is quite good. And the first question, the most difficult. Oui.
Yes, I was just thinking, for people to have so many resources given to them and have access to like so much education, is there not like certainly a more impactful way to use these resources and you know, to create more change? These are people who have access to, you know, positions with great responsibility where they can have a great impact. They could go into diplomacy, they could go into big companies, but instead they decided to act by the bottom, would there not have been a more powerful way to make change? And what is going to be the end impact of all these little unstructured actions?
Doctor?
Yes, one of my students. I mean, I don't obviously have a clear answer to that. I think, I think that question of how does a lot of small changes build up to the big kind of structural changes, and I know some of probably the biggest students who push back on what we teach in our program are actually here this evening, in terms of thinking about, are we just teaching in an existing paradigm, and are we just continuing a paradigm and doing a little bit of changes along the edges? And that's a very good critique of what we might be doing, but it raises the bigger question of, given the scale of the crisis we're faced with, will we be successful, with the resources we have, their use, by changing from within the system, and is that actually possible, or do we need all change to be happening outside and break the current model? And I think that's kind of the base question. If I avoid what you actually asked and try to put something out there, it's really asking, how do you do that? I think each of them individually was seeking for that and then running into the limits of, well, actually you need to make sure you're not poisoning people, and we have rules for that. You need to make sure what you're doing is actually scalable if you actually want to try to make a living, at least within the current system, off of it. So there's a lot of questions there that, do go to how you see that change maybe happening, and then how do we use those resources we have. So hopefully we're teaching you some skill set to understand the world that it is, but then hopefully challenge it and change it as you move forward. And here speaking, of course, to my students directly. But whether we're doing enough is, actually up to you guys to tell us in the program evaluation questionnaire at the end of the 12 months. So I'll hand it now to maybe someone with a younger point of view on this to respond.
I'd also like to add that many people try to stigmatize the movie by saying that it excludes people who maybe already work in, let's say, huge energy companies that have a subsidiary that works on green energy, for instance. And the answer to that is basically saying, we are not trying to attack these people. They are within the system, and there is something to do within the system. There's a rule of thumb that if you think that you have space to do something marginally better within your position, and it's not going to lead you to burnout, or you're not going to feel like you're greenwashing anyone, then go ahead and do it. But the problem is, when you reach that frontier, what are you going to do? What kind of meaning are you going to, add to your professional life? And many people are confronted with the fact that there is none. But I think it's really important to mention that there are people within the system that are probably part of the braver, part of the population, because they're the ones that are being, excluded of meetings because they're the weird ones that want to change everything from behind the scenes and revolutionize the way that we understand concepts such as profit and capitalism and added value and things that other people within those companies don't want to hear. But they're definitely part of the answer, and we're not trying to exclude them at all.
Gabriel, in one of the testimony was about the young soup maker, and for me it's striking that she tries soup. It's a disaster. She goes to fruits, jam, easier, but at some stage we just learned that she's going back to medicine. She wants to go. So it's a basic. When I saw it first, I thought, is she fed up of peeling tomatoes and apricots, and after 3 months of this, she realized that she could be doing this for the rest of her life, and she doesn't want to. That's my first question. Or maybe when she started the whole career, she wanted to be a doctor or something, and she went to that path, and it's only now, after having that path, that she realized that she wanted to change completely her career and do medicine. What was the trigger then?
So Hélène in particular, where she is right now, because the movie was filmed in 2020, so quite a bit of time has passed since then. And what's happened to her is that She failed with her soups and reached success with her jams. And her jam business is still ongoing, and the thing is, it's a small scale, so she doesn't need to increase her involvement in it. You know, she has her partner, she is well organized, and that's allowed her to not do any medical studies, but actually to work on a second documentary with Arthur. So she produced this movie, and she's going to go ahead and produce the second one, but she's co-writing it with Arthur. So what's interesting is that, you know, both of these people went to engineering schools and business schools, and now they're filmmakers, and they have garnered so much, you know, traction in France. They've talked to more than 30,000 students, been to more than 200 universities. They created a collection of NGOs in Brittany where they live that unites 50 NGOs that focus on trying to provide students with answers so that they don't feel lost when they, you know, watch Ruptures, get a sense that they don't want what's been promised to them, and then, you know, where do you go on from then? Well, they're trying to provide the answers, and part of that is in working on a second documentary, which will be in the continuation of Ruptures, because it's focusing on looking at people who work in companies that you wouldn't usually, you know, attribute to ecology or the transition, but who are feeling, you know, what these students are feeling, and who are trying to implement that within their business, even though it's got no link to their studies, no link to how they felt when they were that age. So, you know, that's where life has, you know, gotten her, and maybe she'll pick up medical studies eventually, but I don't think she will. I think she's very happy making documentaries for now, and she's getting prizes for it in Cannes, nonetheless. So.
Yeah, we forgot to mention that. Another question from the floor? A second question from the floor? Another student grilling his teacher? Pas d'autres questions?
Tout le monde a soif.
Tout le monde a soif.
Just a quick question for you. Will you be doing the translation of the next documentary as well?
I have no clue. That's not part of my plans just yet, but yeah. No, but it's honestly, you say that, but I'd be happy to do it, but getting the space and the time to come and show these movies is extremely hard. I must have sent hundreds of emails to so many universities, and I got 3 positive answers out of all of that. And it's not, most of the time, it's not by, you know, not professors who answer, it's people at the French Institut who are willing to participate. It's people from the Alliance Français all across the UK. And that is a reflection of how hard it is to address, to understand how big this movement is in the UK. And the simple answer is that it's not there, definitely not as much as how it is in France. And communicating about the movie is very hard. You know, I'm just a student. I received no training to do any of this, but I'm trying to share it, and whenever I have free time, just go to universities and talk about it. But so if you guys have any contacts, come see me. If you know any places that would be willing, even companies, to show screenings, then that's definitely worth it. What I know is that Arthur and Helene are being asked by lots of companies to come show the movie, because these companies are having problems hiring students. They're having problems hiring students that are now saying, no, we won't come to see you, we won't come to work for you, because you are not in line with our ideals. And to give you very concrete examples of that, there's a consulting firm in France that's very famous called Capgemini, and in 2021, after Ruptures came out, they lost 25% of their entire workforce. Another example is Total Energy, the French major, the oil major. Their CEO has said that the big challenge for the coming decade will be hiring students. That's their main objective. And they're willing to go as far as reducing the work week from 5 to 4 days in order to attract these students. So basically they're going to big lengths to try and attract students, despite the fact that many of them don't want to work for Total anymore. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's another issue is how do you sustain 7 billion people, on the planet when you work less and you get something in return, because this is based with the term.
No, please finish.
That's the whole system. Since Sapiens, started from Marco Polo to go from business exchange, it's all you buy, you receive. The whole system, doesn't work if people get paid for 1 day at work. That's we would have a challenge, Doctor.
I was just going to say, this reminds me a little bit of the discussion that I don't think has happened at University of Edinburgh yet, but it was in The Guardian and in a couple of the specialized press here about whether or not, some of the pressure from student associations to stop certain companies coming to campus to recruit should be allowed or not. And particularly a lot of the oil and gas companies that do, particularly at the engineering schools and a lot of the technical schools, come and recruit students and have been doing so for a very long time. And I think there's kind of two sides. I'm not saying what my opinion is, but there's two sides of this of where, yes, sends a clear sign, you need to change your business model, or, for companies that might have, such as, BP, I think we've all seen the backtracking on their climate commitments over the last couple of days. It's a question of, which companies that are trying to transition, because just because a company today does something that's maybe not consistent with these long-term goals, if there's a credible way of assessing, that they might be changing, hopefully, and that's the hard part, then maybe just because they're in that sector today, that doesn't mean they can't recruit the talent they need to actually change in moving forward. And of course, that's a very, small line to walk to figure out, where a company falls on either side of that line. But I'd be interested to hear from my students whether or not, they want to see those companies coming to recruit, or, whether any of this, had évoqué quelque chose around, the reasons why they came to study climate change at a business school. If I can throw it back at them. I don't know, they don't have to respond, obviously, but...
Leave it in the air. Edouard, tu avais une question.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I was reflecting on, Philippe used the word renouncing. So this is a question for Gabriel. And actually, I wanted to elaborate a bit on the idea of renunciation, because we kind of understand that the perspective of renunciation is more dictated by the mainstream paradigm, big salaries, and so if you want to do something different, you have to give up this. Hence, there is this renunciation. But since you know the crew, you know them, you know the actors, kind of personally, I think. Is there real renunciation for them, or it's more something, or it's more like a positive decision, which actually they've renounced already? So it's like there is nothing to renounce, because this does not make sense to me. I'm not so sure. Do you see what I'm trying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
Sure. That's a great question. Many people often look at these career paths and say, well, look, they're renunciating, they're giving up stuff, they're settling for something lower, something that's less valued, and they're downgrading themselves. As Emma said, she felt herself lowering in her family's esteem. And the truth is, and these people's experience is proof, that engaging in such changes, radical changes in their lives, has provided them with a lot of genuine happiness, and they do not regret one instant of it. None of them have gone back to their previous ways of thought. Maybe they've adjusted their dreams, maybe they've tried to recenter around something more local, something that's more human scale, but none of them feel depressed at all. And that speaks a lot, that says a lot about the movie's message.
Oui, une autre question. Oui.
Yeah, I was going to ask, I understand, and I might be wrong, that the University of Edinburgh are introducing a mandatory module on the environment and climate change for all students. I may be wrong, but if that's the case, are there plans to evaluate the impact of that on students' attitudes or their career aspirations, and whether it has any impact or no impact or some impact?
think it's quite a new discipline that we're trying to adapt at Edinburgh Uni. It's different for those who are going to medicine school. The minute they finish at medicine, they go straight to the Royal Infirmary to practice the following day. But for those in this discipline that you're mentioning at the moment, we haven't put a protocol yet. We're still trying to figure out how it's going to be sustainable. So far, we have been very successful to take the world stage on sustainability. Right now, the University of Edinburgh is the top in the world right now. I think internally we still have a long way to organize the process, how it's going to go. So I cannot tell you right now that we have something already established at university. We're still studying the complexity of the case because it's very complex.
So it's not happening then, it's not going to be mandatory modules?
No.
I can't speak. I mean, University of Edinburgh is massive for anyone who actually, once you think, oh, it's an institution, then you work there and you're like, wow, it's 50 different institutions. So within the business school at the master's level, beyond our dedicated program, we do have a module that incoming students, again, I think at the master's level in their plans, if it hasn't already been kind of rolled out into the undergraduate intake as well, to at least have an introductory session on climate change and sustainability issues. I don't think there's been any assessment of what impact that has on student perception or thoughts. I think that's a very good question to ask. But there is a push, at least within, again, the business school, to try to make sustainability, at least sustainability and hopefully climate change as well, at least a concept that all graduates are familiar with, which means talking to a lot of people who are very fixed in their ways of teaching their course and how you go about accounting and finance to expand out and learn a little bit about these issues as well.
Une question?
On a global scale, how do we consider meaning when we see that all these initiatives are at individual, let's say, level, might be true in one place, as we said initially? How do we adapt or understand that through humanity and the meaning of in different cultures? Places where having industries and polluting would be probably the only way to feed people. How do we integrate this reflection in our Western world and the meaning of it, of what is our lives as we know it as privileged people? How do we adapt that? How do we explain that? And do we have to explain that and to force other countries in the world to? Because let's take the example of the iPhone, whatever. Are we renouncing to our own privilege and cars, iPhone, when we produce these things and pollute other places that need this money also to get better?
I think that's the injustice of this world right now, and that's why I like these young men and young girls coming forward and saying, okay, I got everything, but I'm just realizing I'm destroying other people. You see this Thai village? I think about it, I said, this is a great idea. And I think back in DRC, today, the Democratic Republic of Congo has the larger bill to pay to repair climate change. But you still in the Congo see huts, we're still living on the huts, and we don't hurt the climate, we don't hurt the planet at all. But we have to pay that bill because we're the one who did not use the iPhone, who did not use the polluting. We just lost 20,000 people in Turkey. Why? Not because there was a earthquake, because they didn't respect the environment, the instruction they gave them. They built houses without taking in consideration that this place was most exposed to hackers. So why? Because of overusing. And this young man was dancing, I don't remember his name. He said, Black Friday, spend more. That's the world we are. We don't consider other people around us. We don't consider that maybe next door someone does not have a TV, but Black Friday gets you a 75-inch for $300. You got that, and that's it. So I think it's about time for us, after we have reused, and being egoist, have a thinking about, okay, what are we doing? Because the bill that we have, we cannot pay it anymore. We exploited the planet. We can't pay the bill. We're asking the Africans to pay the bills. And that's why I want to see my hero doing more. That's it.
My hero doing more. Merci beaucoup, Madame la rectrice. Est-ce qu'il y a une autre question?
It's less of a question than a comment, and I'd be interested to get your response to it. When I was the age of those young people and younger, I was marching to Holy Loch against the nuclear bomb. I was going to Greenham Common as a woman. I was going to Aldermaston as a student. And we still have nuclear weapons on a grand scale, far greater than when I was demonstrating in those ancient days. And I think one of the difficulties that faces us tonight is that it's so big and it's such a difficult thing to move privilege from one area and to spread it more evenly. And so it's difficult not to feel extremely pessimistic in the face of this. And I'd like to know what the panel thinks about that, because frankly, I have 8 grandchildren, aged from 26 down to 11. And I know what they're doing among themselves, and I see their ability and their dynamism and their beauty. And of course, as a grandmother, I want them to prosper, but...
Merci, Madame. Vaste question. We saw that in the movie, how the parents react, to this decision.
I think it's very brave that you share that with us, because I think sometimes you feel after so many years of fighting, I don't see the change, And when it comes to climate, recently I was asking, I remember I was in Qatar, and I heard about someone was talking about COP27 with what the youth have done here during the COP27, breaking everything. And I was in that meeting in Qatar, and I said, listen, I want the youth to stand to protect our planet, but they must do it in a sustainable way. We made a lot of mistakes. I fought for human rights. I was 19 until my government said, get out here, we don't want to see you here, go. And I left the country and never returned until now. So there's always a bill to pay when you stand for something. It's heavy on you, on your mind, on your thing, and when you're doing it because of your family, your loved ones, you want them to have and when you don't see progress, it's not good. And that is my message to the youth here. You are going ahead, fighting to see a better planet, the movement for climate change, to do it in a sustainable way. Because I have the impression we're just jumping on the table. We know making any progress, but the energy, the strength you have, if you can focus on doing something sustainable and we can see the change we need to see right now in terms of climate, it will be really something good for all of us.
Une autre réaction, Gabriel?
Yeah, I'd like to add that eco-anxiety is a thing. It exists. In St. Andrews, actually, I had a fellow student who started running what she called eco-anxiety cafes, where students who feel very bad about how the whole climate change situation is unfolding collect, gather, and have a chat. And I think that's one of the better coping mechanisms that are available to us, because as young people, we have the energy, we have the drive, but we don't have the resources, we don't have the influence when it comes to companies, and we don't have the standing. So the way that I think we cope as young people is to find a community and just join it and bond and get a sense of belonging, because I feel like the most gratifying thing you can do is fight for something as a group. If it fails, as Aurélie during her elections in Saint-Brieuc, if it fails, so be it. But she was part of something, and I'm sure that she drew so many lessons from it, whether professional or in terms of what she believes, about local politics, about life, how she organizes it. And that's what matters. That's one step that people can take, but I agree that it's quite hard to go from having an idea of a project and actually launching it, or seeing that there's groups of people that think the same way and joining it, or reaching out to people. That's really hard, yeah.
Oh mon Dieu, plein de mains. Gentlemen with glasses, please.
Don't you think that the high cost of energy in the world is a concrete threat to the revolution, the green revolution, or the conversion from the old economy to the new one?
Energy pricing is very complicated. I'm not the expert. I wish my colleague was here, but I think there's always the question of that, prices are always constructed and there are no real free markets. They're always built by policy. So today we have very high electrical costs coming out of renewable energies because the market works that way, not because producing it is actually more expensive. It's actually cheaper than gas and coal, but because the way the system works. So there's a question of how do we now go about changing these systems that exist, and often it is through policy. Policy, of course, being lobbied by markets and existing interests make it more challenging, but there is a way of making electricity cheaper. We just have to actually make it happen in terms of the political will. But trying to say more than that will probably go beyond my knowledge in terms of the precision, but also it's a very complex pricing system, to be honest. But we've all very much been subject to it over the last 12 months.
And there was a gentleman in the back, yeah?
Just a positive note rather than a question about how Scotland can have a disproportionate positive impact on the world is something that I actually witness in my work. I'm an offshore structural engineer. I work in both offshore wind and oil and gas, so I work with gas and light gas. So the amount of scientific and engineering innovation that is coming out of Scotland to get the offshore wind farms started in an economic and in a competitive way to win against the existing energy sources is a way to lead the world. And we're seeing it already that the United States, like the United States, is looking at expertise from Scotland to start their own wind farms. So Scotland is a small country, but it is able to have disproportionate impact on the world. And I'm not Scottish, I'm not.
That's a positive note, thank you very much for that. Was that the last question from the floor? You've been very good, thank you very much, you've been an amazing audience. I think we can applaud our lovely panel. Thank you very much for that. This is possible because we have a team here at the French Institute, so I would like to thank very much Johan and Jamie and all the staff who could make this prepare. Thank you very much for that. We are open non-stop Monday to Saturday. We teach French. We have, so if you were lucky, they were subtitled, but if you lost in translation, we do teach French here, so register for next term in April. It's been a pleasure to have us here. Come along, this is a friendly place open to all, and now you have even a free glass of wine. Bonne soirée, merci beaucoup.